income inequality. It's a natural thing and the government shouldn't do anything about it. But what is income inequality?
Supposedly, income inequality is the unfair, uneven, some would say even unjustifiable wealth gap between the rich and the poor. In the United States, the wealth gap, or income inequality, has been growing for about 30 years at an exponential rate. Does it affect us?
Yes, you're affected by income inequality only if you're pathetic. You're only affected by income inequality if you feel you should be paid more and your boss should be paid less. But is there still a cure?
Some say we should raise the minimum wage to fix income inequality. What will raising the minimum wage really do? The business that you work for now has to pay you more, and everybody else that makes minimum wage or hire more money to make up for the now mandated law. In turn, they're going to have to spend more money from their bottom line, and they're going to have to raise prices to make up for their loss of income. This bad is going to cancel out, and ultimately you're going to have more money that's worth less, because if every business in America has to do that, everybody's going to be charging more. So you're going to have more money, and it's going to be worth about the same or less, but you're just going to have more of it. Cancel out. Now we have something called a maximum salary cap, where you put a cap on the amount of money that people can make per year. That's communism. Come on. If you want to go live in Cuba or North Korea or Vietnam or Laos, where you can not make as much money as you can here, go ahead. But then you're living in Cuba, in Vietnam, in North Korea, in Laos, where they don't have freeways or plumbing or constant electricity or education or healthcare. And if you get stung by a bee, you're probably going to die. So whatever, you can go. So there's the cures. Now let's talk about facts.
Let's reduce the 311 million Americans to just a representative 100 people. Make it simple. Here they are: teachers, coaches, firefighters, construction workers, engineers, doctors, lawyers, some investment bankers, a CEO, maybe a celebrity or two. Now let's line them up according to their wealth. Poorest people on the left, wealthiest on the right, just a steady row of folks based on their net worth. We'll color code them like we did before based on which 20% quintile they fall into. Now let's reduce the total wealth of the United States, which was roughly $54 trillion in 2009, to this symbolic pile of cash. And let's distribute it among our 100 Americans. This is what people think America's wealth distribution actually looks like. Not as equitable, clearly, but for me, even this still looks pretty great. Yes, the poorest 20 to 30% are starting to suffer quite a lot compared to the ideal, and the middle class is certainly struggling more than they were, while the rich and wealthy are making roughly 100 times that of the poorest Americans, and about 10 times that of the still healthy middle class. Sadly, this isn't even close to the reality. Here is the actual distribution of wealth in America. The poorest Americans don't even register. They're down to pocket change, and the middle class is barely distinguishable from the poor. In fact, even the rich between the top 10 and 20 percentile are worse off. Only the top 10% are better off. And how much better off? So much better off that the top 2 to 5% are actually off the chart at this scale. And the top 1%, this guy, well, his stack of money stretches 10 times higher than we can show. Here's his stack of cash, restacked, all by itself. This is the top 1% we've been hearing so much about. So much green in his pockets that I have to give him a whole new column of his own, because he won't fit on my chart. 1% of America has 40% of all the nation's wealth. The bottom 80%, 8 out of every 10 people, or 80 out of these 100, only has 7% between them. And this has only gotten worse in the last 20 to 30 years. While the richest 1% take home almost a quarter of the national income today, in 1976 they took home only 9%, meaning their share of income has nearly tripled in the last 30 years. The top 1% own half the country's stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. The bottom 50% of Americans own only 0.5% of these investments, which means they aren't investing. they're just scraping by. I'm sure many of these wealthy people have worked very hard for their money. But do you really believe that the CEO is working 380 times harder than his average employee? Not his lowest paid employee, not the janitor, but the average earner in his company. The average worker needs to work more than a month to earn what the CEO makes in 1 hour. We certainly don't have to go all the way to socialism to find something that is fair for hardworking Americans. We don't even have to achieve what most of us consider might be ideal. All we need to do is wake up and realize that the reality in this country is not at all what we think it is.
Even though that video looks really extreme, the facts aren't as bad as it looks. First of all, the graph that you saw in the video doesn't include things such as taxes or charities that everybody gives to, but especially the rich. The rich, by far, pay the highest percentage of taxes in this country, because if you're making $300 billion, you're going to be paying at least $1 million in taxes. So a lot of these people are literally paying what these people make per year in taxes. So you're at the top, and think of what our tax dollars do. Freeways, schools, Obamacare, whatever. So it doesn't include taxes or charitable givings. These people on the bottom are most likely on some sort of government aid. In fact, 23% of the population, about 144 million Americans, receive government aid. Government aid pretty much covers many things, including housing. You can get subsidized housing. You can get help with your rent. There's healthcare, Obamacare, go to the clinic for free. There's a health department, get free flu shots, HPV, whatever. And then also you can get food stamps, bridge card, whatever. So the graph looks really extreme. However, if you really break it down, what these people are paying for, or they pay a lot more in taxes than the people down here. We actually have a quote by the former Vice President Assistant of the St. Louis Federal Reserve, and he says statistics do not include non-cash resources received by low-income households and the tax payments made by wealthier households to fund these transfers. So basically he's just kind of saying, or I just kind of said what he says, they're paying a lot in taxes, we're really benefiting.
So the crux of our argument comes down to these basic fundamental issues right here. If we increase the income inequality gap, we're going to devalue education nationwide. There's going to be less incentive to work hard for Americans all across the board, and degrees will have even less value than they do right now. An average job should not equal premium wage. That's just fair to everybody that went to school and got their degrees like we're trying to do right now. Cost of food, gas, and basic amenities will rise. So this is just an example of how our situation could be if we change that income gap. It could be $9 for just 1 gallon of gas. There will be less tax money available for government assistance, so less bridge cards, less food stamps, less help with housing, less help for single moms, less help for everybody. It's really not going to help the bottom 40% of America right here. And most importantly, we want to acknowledge our own personal responsibility. Nobody determines our income level except us. So if we want to be up here with the top 19%, we have to work hard and get our degrees like these people. If we're satisfied with low wages, we'll always be down here. So at the end of the day, it's all up to you.